So I found myself in a bit of a panic at the end of last week. So it's been a couple of months since Mr. Baxter asked me to do a Pecha Kucha presentation. And you know, I hadn't thought about it that much in the interim, and my recollection was rather hazy. And actually, I remembered him saying, would you do a presentation on Pecha Kucha? Who, as you know, now, in my defence, I have to say that A, Mr. Baxter is from Canada, B, he's an NHL player, and C, the Rangers are a client of ours. So there I was, presenting what I thought was quite an interesting case study. I'll look at the invitation and see what it says. And I'm sort of looking at this vision in green, this rising green sun, thinking, what the fuck is Pecha? What do I know about liberating constraints? At which point, fortunately, inspiration struck, and I thought, well, I'll just talk about hockey. Because there, the ice skate is, I think, a wonderfully liberating constraint. Take a really, really difficult game, put it on ice, and then make people wear really sharp metal blades on their feet. They mean that they can go very, very fast, but they can't balance very well. That's genius, and that is the genius of hockey. But really, not very relevant to planets, is it? So I thought, what do I do now? I thought, well, something universal. Music, maybe. The universal language of music. I thought, well, the time signature. That is the constraint that liberates musicians to, you know, play with other musicians. It liberates musicians to connect with their audience. If you can hold a 4/4, you can make people dance. Oh, that's awesome. But, you know, not really all that relevant, is it? I thought, I'll design. That's a bit closer to what some of us do on a daily basis. And the grid system, obviously, is that constraint that's at the heart of town planning and street planning and, you know, web design. Oh, God, you know, it's just not very interesting, is it? And I thought, I'm talking to a lot of planners, why don't I just talk about planning? Because really, that's kind of our role, isn't it? To be the liberating constraint. I thought, well, maybe we'll just chew on that for a second. Because really, kind of what we're meant to be is the structure that helps people to think brighter thoughts. I thought, well, maybe we should just think about that. How do we actually get to that point? And it reminded me of a sort of a cavalier chap from years and years ago called Norman Berry, who was for a long time the executive creative, worldwide creative director of Ogilvy. And he was allegedly the first person to take paradox to task and say, give me the freedom of a tight brief. That's all I ask from you. I thought, well, that's a pretty brilliant thought, and that indeed is a liberating constraint. The irony, of course, is that when you search the creative brief on Google, everything you get back is neither creative, nor brief, nor liberating. It is, in fact, entirely constraining, like this creative pyramid, for example, that is apparently, in textbook language, meant to help creative turn strategies into big ideas. Or indeed this selected advertising appeals grid, it just doesn't help, does it? So I was wondering, well, what actually does help us to become that liberating constraint? And a friend of mine, fortunately, in London, had a great idea, I thought, on what that took, and it's best illustrated with reference to the Dutch. Now, just in case there are any smart-ass Midwesterners here, I'm perfectly aware that this is a picture of Holland, Michigan. That America does a better job of the Dutch than the Dutch do. Now, as many of you may know, though, the Dutch are a devilishly inventive bunch. We can credit them with everything from the microscope to the submarine to the speeding camera, boo, to the artificial kidney, yay, the CD to the television screen. What's interesting is that that creativity and that ingenuity has often been put down to the fact that their country lies below sea level, and therefore they've had, for generations, they've had to apply their creativity to basically prevent themselves from being drowned. It's a noble objective, but actually, I think the root of their creativity lies with something much, much more fundamental than that, which is that the Dutch love problems. If you spend enough time in Holland, you realise that almost every sentence begins with, well, the problem is, which although irritating, I actually think is the root of their creativity, their embrace of problems, the fact that they revel in problems. It's kind of interesting for us because planners like problems too, but actually I think sometimes we jump a little bit too quickly to the proposition, because the proposition is a bit more creative and it's a little bit more glamorous, but actually it's also more restricting because the proposition is prescriptive. Whereas the problem, allows for a complete, unprescriptive creative solution. And I think in order to become the liberating constraint, maybe we just need to learn to love the problem a little bit. Just embrace the problem. And I think perhaps that actually might help us liberate people to think about those brighter thoughts more often. Now I think Norman, bless him, might have liked that. And actually, my favourite communications problem was articulated by his alma mater when they were pitching for the IBM business, when they said, let's just turn big blue into bright blue. And I thought, that's a lovely problem. I'd love to have a crack at that problem, because I think I could do something really interesting with that. But aside from that, I was looking at this picture of Norman, and I was actually searching for other pictures, and I found one that disturbed me a little, and reminded me of what the ultimate liberating constraint is, and not to be too morbid, it's death, isn't it? We're not here for all that. We haven't got that much time. But I think, actually, if we embrace our mortality, if we recognise that there are a certain number of days that we have here, then that can be tremendously liberating, because it will say to us, let's not do dull things. Let's do fun things. Let's search for new ideas. Let's search for new experiences. And that, I think, can be a tremendously liberating state that I think can help us as planners. I think it might make us more interesting also as people. The only thing I would say in conclusion to that is if any of you are finding it difficult to attain that state in your corporate lives, I can wholeheartedly recommend the liberating constraint of prosperity.